This is an overview of economics for speech and debate students on current events. And this is adapted from a presentation prepared for the Vancouver Debate Academy and also for American Logos. I had a chance to talk to students with both organizations this year, as well as do a number of workshops on the STOA homeschool topic on energy policy, the NCFCA transportation policy topic, and the public schools have a topic on fiscal transfers to reduce economic inequality. So that's a lot to cover. I'm not going to cover the details of all these policies, but try instead to give you an introduction to the economic way of thinking that's relevant for these and other topics that you might get at a World Schools tournament or parliamentary debate or for extemporaneous speaking. And my organization's Economic Thinking, I have other videos on these topics from this year and last year at our YouTube page. Okay. So I've done workshops through the year: economic freedom and energy policy, economic freedom and transportation policy. For the fiscal redistribution topic, presentations for the University Interscholastic League. And in all these, I'm trying to recommend books, research, think tanks, different ways of looking at these topics. But as you can see, the general theme is economic freedom. And as an economist, you might have economics introduced to you as about supply and demand or prices and marketplaces. Sure, all that's important, but ultimately we're on a search for prosperity and human flourishing. What policies allow people to flourish, people to have enough money for food, for housing, for clothing? And why is it that people in some parts of the world, the United States, Europe, Japan, for example, and now Singapore, South Korea, people in these countries are prosperous, are far wealthier than their grandparents or great-grandparents, and prosperity comes rapidly to some places. Chile was the poorest country in Latin America. A few decades later, it's the wealthiest. Ireland in the 70s, early 80s was the poorest country in Western Europe. By 2005, it's one of the wealthiest. How does that prosperity come so rapidly to people? India, the debate topic, motion announced for the Harvard World Schools tournament, mentions privatizing public banks in India. Well, why does the government run banks? Well, that's a good question. And how does it work? And the broader background question is, how is it that India's economic growth is so rapid in the last couple decades compared to what it was before? India became a democracy in 1947 and stagnated for decades. How come? China, desperately poor under communism. 1989, they have market reforms. China had economic growth 6, 7, 8% a year for decades. That's unheard of. China has been transformed by the economic freedom policy. And so many debate topics that involve what U.S. should do in response to China now, whether it's TikTok or protectionism on electric cars or solar panels. All this takes place against a background of China being incredibly impoverished for decades and decades and decades, and suddenly coming into the developed world where, the middle class in China, middle income people are bigger than the entire U.S. population. Cities like Shenzhen, Shanghai were impoverished before, now they're wealthy. Okay, so the background on all these topics, I would say for economic freedom, what sort of energy policy allows America to flourish? Keeps energy costs down. We want energy that's clean, reliable, affordable. Similarly, transportation policy, we don't want to get stuck in traffic jams. We don't want to pay high prices for goods because they're locked up on the freeway or in the ports, can't get from here to there. Combination of energy and transportation policy are federal government push for electric cars, electric buses, electric rail, high-speed rail. These policies have raised costs. They've gone sideways in many ways. students can call for reforming them, for ending subsidies for electric cars. A lot of people like electric cars. Teslas are great. They don't need federal subsidies. They don't need state subsidies. So getting the government out of these transportation policies that favor, ethanol or biofuels, other biofuels, favor electricity. Federal government shouldn't be doing that. We want rules of the game. We want a level playing field, but it's time to end the major federal interventions in energy that have been around since the Arab oil crisis, OPEC crisis that led to gas lines in the 1980s and launched the whole push to reduce use of fuel. Similarly in transportation, again, push toward electricity, push to get people out of cars, push for light rail. These are all policies critics say have been counterproductive, and now our infrastructure is crumbling. The roads don't have enough gas tax to maintain them. Transporting fuel instead of by pipeline, we now go on trains and trucks because of regulations that restrict new pipelines. Regulations restrict power lines, which make it harder for wind and solar, as well as harder to secure the grid. So there's a whole range of things. Restriction of transporting natural gas, either in pipelines between states or from our ports, due to the Jones Act and due to recent restrictions on LNG expansion. So lots of things to talk about there. And then on the fiscal redistribution side, they're saying, look, we've got a real problem. People can't afford houses. Some people are left behind. And the rich are too rich. How can we help low-income people? Well, one way is to lower their energy costs, lower their transportation costs, which means lower the cost of cars, and lower the cost of housing. And you can do all those things because federal policies and state policies have caused these high prices that mostly hit low-income people. So, I'll talk forever at this rate, but let's move on.